Antonia, first of all, what is the latest on the manhunt for the suspect?
Good morning, guys. Well, law enforcement has fanned out across New England, and we're talking about an investigation that is not only led by the Maine State Police, but is involving federal partners, FBI, ATF, as well as other local law enforcement agencies, and with assistance from states like Massachusetts and New Hampshire here. And that is, of course, because he is on the run, and there is concern that he may not even be in this county or perhaps even in Maine at this point. And so authorities have a kind of wide lens here. We don't know the exact perimeter. And while, you just talked about the search warrants executed last night, we know that authorities are considering the possibility, he owned jet ski boats. There are multiple ways in which he could have moved. And as many people have discussed here, we know more about both his mental state and his training, his past. He was an Army reservist. He was incredibly proficient in the use of firearms, had been an instructor in some capacity. And so, we're not just talking about anyone on the run here. We're talking about somebody who would very much perhaps have survival skills, have knowledge of the wooded areas throughout Maine. And that is why we are still under a shelter-in-place order here. Businesses are closed. School is out another day, second day in a row. 3 people are still in critical condition behind me here. 3 of the victims passed away in the medical facility here. And so we're in this really heartbreaking and excruciating place, guys, where, the community is starting to grieve, still waiting for the confirmation of the names of some of the victims, but also unable to gather. They can't have vigils. People can't, meet up in public and, process all of this together because we are still in an active threat.
Absolutely. Such a good point. Antonia, tell us also in the aftermath, I know we're learning about the victims. Tell us about them.
Well, NBC News has independently verified 14 of the 18 people who were killed that night. But as I mentioned, 3 other people are still in critical condition, and we're learning from some of the residents who we've had conversations with. I spoke to one woman, a woman who's lived here her entire life, named Cynthia Hunter, who was here at the ER as people were brought in minutes after 7 p.m. as the shootings transpired. And she described seeing people of all ages brought in critical condition here. We know from the 14 that we have identified that they're of mixed genders, ages here. And then we also were learning a bit more about what was happening that night. At the bowling alley, it was youth night. And at the bar and restaurant where the other half of the shooting took place, we know that there was a gathering of deaf cornhole players. And so this has sent shockwaves through the entire community, but it has had an outsized impact on the deaf community here in this part of Maine. And so there's immense grief there and an effort to reach out to families and friends of those who were involved in those tournaments and youth nights to see what kinds of supports they need now. And what we're seeing is people are calling their local radio stations. They're reaching out to each other in groups on Facebook right now because they can't get together in person. And so they're kind of finding ways to communally grieve and talk about their losses, or, really just connect notes about what happened that night in the best ways that they can, guys.
So, Antonia, the shelter-in-place order, which impacts towns and schools up to 50 miles away, any idea how long that's going to stay in place? Will it be until Card is caught?
That's what it's looking like right now, although, there are some hopes from the community that perhaps they'll get some information that will allow them to bring at least school back. It's been devastating for kids who have been stuck at home, living in fear, waiting to hear when they might be able to leave their homes. We've heard from people who say that they've been turning their lights out when the sun goes down at night to make sure that, if Robert Card is out there, he doesn't see their home as a target, doesn't choose to come visit them. They've been locking their barns, locking up their cars. And so, the urgency here is to try to get a little bit of life back to normal, a little bit of community presence here on the ground. But what we've heard from authorities is that so long as there is still this concern of an active threat, that they want people to shelter in place. That's the best information, the best advice they can give people right now. I don't think you can see it behind me here, but all day yesterday, there were officers here who had long guns, and they told us that they were going to have that kind of presence in front of the hospital so long as that active threat was in place, and they felt that they needed the shelter-in-place order here, guys.
Antonia, we can, though, see, and as you just referenced, that you are in front of that hospital. Do we have any more information on those who were injured in this?
Well, we know that 3 people are in critical condition and still receiving care here, although doctors and authorities have declined to comment on the exact profile, on whether any of those people are minors. The community, though, of course, at this point, if you are, of course, a friend or a mom or dad and you haven't seen your loved one, you're starting to get a sense that you may be about to receive some of the worst news, a family could possibly receive. And so the community has been trying to compare their own notes. But we know that 3 people died here that night, that 3 people are still receiving treatment, and that others were sent to other medical facilities around the state. And we expect to receive updates on them soon.
All right. Antonia Hylton in Maine. Antonia, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.